Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? We are back, Many Hands Podcast with the Many Hands crew. Everybody say, what's up?
What's up? What's up?
What's up? Good morning. All right. We always have a lot of behind the scenes conversation. We're coming to you with our business and social consciousness conversation, where we are always aiming at making a difference. So many things going on. The news is at a fast pace, but let's see who we have. To my right, you can catch him between motivational platforms, supporting clients on mental and physical wellness and closing culture gaps. We have Mr. Rio Winfrey.
Good morning. God bless you all and happy Sunday to you.
All right. Next up, making the world a little smaller by connecting powerhouse companies with superior brands, creating opportunities and funneling in dollars. We have Mr. Antoine Watts.
Hey, good morning, everybody. We're in the building today.
All right. And at the corner of cultural diversity and leadership, making a sharp right on Investment Avenue while bringing a few young soldiers with him, we have Brian McKinney. Oh.
Hey. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get into it.
All right. And I'm here. Creating strategies, analyzing data, and speaking on business development. I'm with you all the way. So let's get into it. Today, our topic is disingenuous.
Ooh.
I had to go with it, guys. I said, you know what? Listen, you can't be in this climate and not see that some people are just simply disingenuous. They don't mean any of the words they say. They don't even know how to respond. And right now we're at a point where we're delving into hearts and lip service no longer matters. So it's just in the forefront. It's everywhere we go. We've seen companies scrambling to say Black Lives Matter, what it means to them. But few of them have taken the time to develop a tangible strategy for authentic and measurable change. What do you think, guys? What do you think the response should be from companies at this time?
I feel like companies need to take the mindset of just separating the business for just a moment. I mean, you get the feeling that some of the companies, not all, are just doing it just to check a box. But they really need to deep dive. They need to deep diving into the culture and the state of their environment within that company. So they need to reach out to, let's say, some of the those that have been impacted by it, those employees. They need to have calls with them specifically, and then obviously come out as a whole to the whole floor, the whole company, but also put some resources in place to educate those people that are not as aware. So there need to be some resources and tools available. Constant discussions. You can't have just one call about it, check off the box, and then just keep moving. Because this thing is, obviously we know it's not going anywhere. It's not going to just be something it's a trend or a fad. So they need to have definitely some resources available.
Yeah. So we talked behind the scenes a little bit, and we saw a depiction of some of the current diversity councils that are representing this topic within companies, and there's no diversity on these panels. And it's a subset of the company, right? It's a microcosm of the company. And a diversity panel of all, I mean, you should reach out to, even if you've never spoken to them, this is the time to reach out to them and garner their opinions and create, again, tangible strategy around what is bleeding the life out of America, and people still aren't doing it. They're doing it for the sake of a fad. That's kind of, I would say it's hurtful. It's hurtful to the people who are working with these companies.
Yeah, it's tough to believe in the believe that someone is being genuine when you look at a diversity, council or someone who's leading a diversity movement or group, and it all looks the same. And that being that there's no diversity on that group. It's kind of hard to, you know what I mean? Like, for me anyway, I find that just difficult to say, well, how, again, to your earlier points, are you doing it because that's what's hot and you don't want to seem like you're not sitting at the table? Or is there really, action that's coming? But it's hard to do when you don't have a single person, a single diverse person at the table. And pardon me, but having a group of white women at the table does not exactly qualify as diverse.
Right, and just to touch on that, well, what both of you said, when you have these, we've had many conversations with people when they say, well, I just didn't know. Okay, well, there's gonna be a lot of that. So how about this novel concept? When you have a diversity panel, how about you have some diversity on it? Let's just, because again, you only experience what you experience. I can't speak for some other folks from other races and how they feel about certain things. So yeah, that should just be the case. And B, you being one of your main things that you do as far as diversity inclusion, you're able to see it from a different scope sometimes, even some of the intricacies of the do's and don'ts, right? So, but one quick thing, I talked to somebody this week about a friend of mine who works for a company where tragically, now he told me I couldn't mention it, so I won't mention the name of the company, but tragically they've had to deal with some things nationally as far as, office shootings, office shooting and, some bomb threats and things of that nature. And he said, we've never had any counseling on any of that. He said, if there's a school shooting, what do? First thing they do is send counselors to the schools. And he said, I'm not saying they shouldn't do that because that's youth. He's like, but they have counseling for teachers. He's like, we have PTSD too. He said, we didn't go to Iraq. We didn't go to Afghanistan. We didn't go to Vietnam. But when your own neighborhood is a microcosm of that as well, don't I have PTSD?
Right.
And, that just made me think, again, we've talked about this on a previous show. I think his Meek Mill, obviously a rapper out of Philly, Meek was very adamant about that. He said, me walking in my neighborhood and dealing with some of the stuff I dealt with, you mean to tell me I didn't need counseling? I needed jail, I needed prison, but I didn't need counseling?
Yeah, and see, that kind of takes us into the defunding the police argument where, people are just looking at, oh, you're defunding the police, so you don't want that kind of protection. No, we're asking for funds to be reallocated to where it most makes sense, and that there's some benefit. There's some, the housing programs, the summer job programs. There's, education, putting more money into our schools, after school care. Because let's face it, if you're in an inner city and that parent is working more a lion's share of the day versus, a suburb where you have one stay-at-home parent, what are you expecting the discrepancies and the differences to be? And it's a reality. So defunding the police doesn't mean taking monies away from the police department for argument's sake. It means reallocating them to where it makes sense for the community and uplifting the community. And that's what people don't see. And honestly, as Black people, we're used to doing the heavy lifting, right? We're not arguing about wearing a mask because what's the big deal, right? The same people who are staying inside and wearing a mask and doing all the heavy lifting throughout this movement are the same people who did all the work on the group project. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Was that you at school? Was that you? Were you doing all the work? Or were you coasting? You put your name on the front cover. Don't front.
Let me know when you guys are done. Let me know when y'all are done.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the degradation of society is all starting from, conversations that don't want to be had. What do we do differently? So, we're kind of mixing our words with, culture and, do we matter and how are we celebrated in society and are we voiceless? Mm-hmm. And it extends to where we're underrepresented. So 81% of venture capital firms don't have a single Black investor, and Black men only represent 2% of VC firms, and Black women don't even rank as a single percentage point. Mm-hmm. So, you could assemble a fantastic diversity council optically, but how do we create movement so that there's true diversity and people from it's not this homogenous group of people with the same tired ideas that are unqualified to take a company or a country further? Mm-hmm. What can we do?
I feel like it's gonna be like a plan. I think I let this point out earlier when I was speaking earlier. So when I say these companies need to treat it like, to a degree, how they treat their business. Like if you go to like your leadership, like, hey, this happened. Okay. One of their questions is going to be, so what's your plan? So we're going to talk diversity and, things they could be doing that are making them not seem as disingenuous. What's your plan? What are some target days? Like, what are we doing? And then actually being held accountable to those plans. We need to see a plan of action and hold them to it. That goes for corporations, that goes for countries and so forth. There has to be a plan. We need to know when it's going to happen. How are we doing? We need updates. That's how you build the trust at the end of the day.
Well, and it's something else to that, right? Businesses, so making diversity not just a checkbox activity, and actually showing the value. So listen, the studies and the data are there to show that diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams in terms of idea generation, sales, whatever the case is. It's there. And so what I feel like where companies, again, diversity and inclusion is a hot button word or hot button phrase that's been thrown around for the last couple of years, and companies don't want to get left out. So they say, hey, we're gonna make this diversity and inclusion team. But again, the motivation behind it is to check a box and say that we have one, not to actually make change. So if you're not interested in trying to make change, nothing's going to happen.
Right. We're not agreeing on the main points, systemic racism. We're not agreeing on that. And a lot of these statements, these corporate statements, they've been rejected, and rightfully so, because they're disingenuous. So Ben and Jerry's, when they made their statement, that was widely accepted because the acknowledgement of racism, the part that they've played, those kind of things. When you have an apology that says, well, if I offended you, nobody wants to hear that. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't know if you saw the response from Coach K. If you haven't, he gave powerful. Did you see that? Yeah.
Yes, that was great.
It was powerful. And then, unfortunately, we kind of touched on this behind the scenes earlier where, are we defensive? Are we cynical? Where does the truth actually lie? Right. So he's made most of his money, his career, his reputation on the backs of young Black men. Mm-hmm. Now, does he know that and appreciate it and understand that his voice is meaningful at this time? Or is the threat of, and I don't really have a bad word to say about Coach K in particular, but, just think about the scenario, is just the threat of, if I don't stand by my players at this time, that's an end for the big picture. We had a USA softball team who walked off because their coach, if you didn't see this, so now we're talking about elite athletes, right? So the coach tweeted a picture of them during the national anthem and made a reference to Trump. So they walked off, right? Mm-hmm. They have, I think, one or two Black players. Once the first Black player walked off, and kudos to the team for supporting and understanding. You don't speak for us. You don't speak for us politically. That's strong. I mean, there's a lot of reasons before this. I mean, my platform has never really been used for politics, and I'm very clear of who I am. I'm very clear about my strengths. I'm very clear of who I can benefit. I'm very clear about my message. I'm very clear about my future. I'm very clear about my blessings. So which makes me also clear on what I'm not. And it's never really been my platform, but it gets to the point where, I have to share the stories of, when I was paid less, when I felt the racism of the low expectation that was just brought to me instead of the rest of the team, where I was not given a voice at the table, or where I was the only voice at a table, but still silent because I wasn't given the floor. So, it comes a point where, it has to mesh together. So I'm not saying that Coach K was necessarily not heartfelt or disingenuous or anything like that, but it always makes you wonder, what's the tipping point, kind of like myself, what's the tipping point to when you have to speak? So I ask you guys, what's the tipping point for America? What's the tipping point for you individually?
Great question.
That was a great point.
That was
you made. First,
I was still digesting that. I was like,
I was right, and then she hit us with a question, right? But I
love you guys.
Something real quick about So Coach K and him having that message, and I apologize because I did not see that, but I will say this: Coach Greg Popovich, he speaks out all the time. He uses his platform all the time to speak about racial inequalities, how he is proud of the NBA for what they are and who they are, but how they could also be better. So when people use their platforms in times such as this, when we're going through it as a country as a whole, and it's the talking point on every media outlet, I'm skeptical sometimes, because why weren't you speaking about that all the time? And maybe Coach K was. I know I pay attention to college athletics, and I don't believe I ever heard him use his platform for that. And he may have. But again, I look to individuals that don't look for the actual talking point, but they actually understand the gravity of who they are, their careers, how they benefited, what, like, you said, what their blessings were, right? So I apologize because your question, but I was just thinking about the Coach K thing, because there are a lot of powerful people out here that don't use their platforms until times like this.
Right. And then people's value changes, right? The value doesn't change, but their efforts change. So if you're talking, but you're funding the movement, you know what I mean? You shouldn't be devalued for that, because maybe that's your position. Right. And then you're being authentic, not disingenuous. You're being authentic because maybe your voice is not the best voice.
Exactly.
And we have to keep in mind that people, the role that people play will be different, right? Not everybody's going to play the same role. Not everybody's going to be on the front lines. Not everybody's going to be, outspoken. Some people are making moves behind the scenes, and that's okay, right? Because there's a spot to play and there's a role to play. I think specifically to Coach K, I don't know that I believe it's disingenuous. I think he is somebody who, over time, right? I think you're right. He has made great wealth on with his involvement with Black, ball players. But I think he's somebody who seems to come from a higher, a moral standing. But you're right, Greg. Popovich, San Antonio Spurs. You have Steve Kerr as well, who continue to speak out and be on the front lines, and which is great to see. And maybe we're in a time where we're seeing evolution, right? Because we can't always hold people for where they were, and we have to see where they are and meet them where they are. And I think that maybe that's something that we're going to start to see more of.
Right. And so there was, I believe it was Twan, you shared one time, maybe it was during season 1, where it could even been a behind the scenes conversation, where there's a particular profile of athlete that Coach K would recruit versus who he wouldn't. Is that fact?
Right. So there were 2-parent household, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Black players that would go play for him always came from a specific type of household. There weren't a lot of the inner city kids from 1-parent households. And this was talked about behind the scenes for many, many years before. And I'll tell you, Jalen Rose was one of the ones from ESPN, former NBA player, who talked about it at length when he was younger. And Chris Webber talked about it at length because Duke was one of the schools that he was considering going to over Michigan.
But he did. Wait, did he get recruited for Duke or he did not?
So Chris Webber came from a 2-parent household.
So right? He did.
And he did get recruited for Duke. Chris Webber was also, I think, that year the number 1 player in the country. Mm-hmm. But he was getting recruited but he did fit the mold, mm-hmm. right? Whereas Jalen Rose, again, another highly recruited player in the country, that same invitation was not afforded to him, mm-hmm. right? And,
so where did those 2 players go to college? So we're clear. Where did the 2 players go to college?
So they both ended up at Michigan as part of the famous Fab Five.
Thank you.
Yes. So, and again, that could have been for many reasons. Let's be clear. I'm not saying that Coach K did not recruit Jalen Rose just because he came. There's a formula. But the thing is, they had a formula. And it wasn't necessarily to me to benefit the kid. It was to benefit the program and to make sure they fit in the program and the school and the culture of the school.
So anything with a program is systemic, yes?
Right.
Yeah.
So it stands to reason. I think he's one of the greatest coaches. I don't take any of that away from him, but you see how the jigsaw puzzle comes together. And so even people or programs or instances, circumstances where you don't think has anything to do with the widespread of our problem and the historic nature of our problem actually do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wanted to go back and answer that great question of yours with the tipping point. I feel, and it could be, because I'm a Black man, I don't know what the case is, but for me, just how blatant, just going back to the George Floyd, at that point, it was just enough is enough. So something within me was like, doing what I can, if anything, to make my voice heard. The platform that I do have, use that any way I can. I've heard somebody say, hey, it's not our job to educate those that don't understand. But for me personally, I'm open to it, So it gave me also the opportunity to try to find a positive. You know me, Mr. Positivity. I think that also.
Come a long way since prosthetics. We're not going to get into that.
But I don't mind that. If somebody is genuinely, and I know this is about being disingenuous, somebody genuinely does not understand but is open to hearing, I'm all about it in educating that. And we talked about the word defensive earlier. A lot of times when people are defensive, that's when you block the knowledge and the education that they need. But I think that's also been a big issue at the same time. But I have to say something. I'm open to educate those. That's what the biggest thing is, educating. Like you talked about defunding the police. You gave a great stance behind what it actually is. But there's still so many out there that just feel like we want to get rid of police and that we hate police, and that's not the case. So it's all with the education. But to get that, you got to quit being defensive and want to learn and definitely be a part of that change.
And Rio, you're absolutely right, because again, we're still having conversations of why Kaepernick kneeled in the first place, right? There's no conversation about it. He's been blatantly clear about it, but there's still those that say, no, he's against the flag. He's against the country.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
There's enough evidence that he should be considered exonerated.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when you say like you're willing to be open to have this conversation with people, I'm with you. My problem is this, and you can tell very quickly, like what their agenda is, and an agenda may be a strong word. What their intent is, right? Because they coming into the conversation, I want to know more. I want to understand, and then when you start to tell them, then it goes to, well, if we do this, who are you going to call when a crime's committed? Right. Oh, so you're against the country too. Oh, you don't support our military. Oh, you know what? Right. I see where this conversation is going. You know what? You have a great day. We gonna go ahead and end this right here, because I understand what narrative you want at that point, and I'm not gonna give it to you.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Because there's folks that are the easy response to Black Lives Matters, all lives matter. The reason why Kaepernick is bad is because he was kneeling for the flag. However, those are the same folks who are wearing the flag on their swimming trunks, or they're draping it over their shoulders in the ways that you're not supposed to treat the flag. When you say defund the police, it's you want to. The quick response is to take it all the way the opposite, without looking to see further into it and delve deeper into it. When we say defund the police, we're not saying abolish all police. However, if dismantling and rebuilding is what's necessary, then that's what it is, right? But also in defunding, the budget for the police is so much greater than that of education or different communities or neighborhoods and those types of things, that you could still remove some of the funding and the overspending that's being used. Because do the police really need to have grenade launchers and tanks to roll down your neighborhood street? Probably not, right? So a $70,000
you should audit every government organization, right? Like that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, honestly, if I went to B and I'm like, hey babe, do you love me? And he goes, hey, I love a lot of people. It's on.
It's right. On. I just sent a graphic that I saw the other day, and I meant to send it to you, and you guys may have already seen it, but it gives some examples, right, in relation to Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. So it says we have Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We don't say during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, well, hey, all cancers matter.
Right.
Like nobody argues those kind of things, right? And there's a couple more like relatable things on that. And I hold on one like one was when the Las Vegas shooting happened, people changed their profiles to say stand with Vegas. Nobody said stand with everyone, right? But this is the thing, when the Boston Marathon was bombed and everybody's profile picture was Boston Strong, nobody said all cities strong, right? It just seems to matter when it's what we're talking about, this subject, or topics that affect systemic racism, right? Like, so that's this. I don't understand when it's so. Well, blue lives matter too, and all lives matter. My life matters. You're absolutely right. But in this moment, this is breast cancer awareness right now. This is not all cancer matters at this point, right? So this is what I just don't understand. People have no problems when it comes to other topics of individualism with organizations. Yeah. But when it comes to this, it's a firestorm.
Right. It's so simple. It's so simple. How can all lives matter when over centuries where Black lives have not mattered?
Historically.
Right.
Well, and not only have not mattered, but there have been laws in place to make sure that, well, you're only 3/5 of a man, so
exactly
you can't vote. It wasn't made for that. We will burn this down. We will redline. We will not, participate. It's and they have to understand the history, and I think that history is a big part of the education. And so, we're talking about, so everybody's disingenuous, blah blah. What should the corporate response be? And so when I'm working with clients on PR, something, how do we overcome something? So there are a few steps, right? You have to correct any false information. You have to utilize facts to improve the credibility of yourself or, your company. You have to avoid appearing defensive. You have to push positives about you and your company. And you have to take advantage of the mediums, whether they be social media out there or whatever it is, right? So that's how you piece together, hey, let me combat this negative image or, what's going on out there. But it occurred to me when I went down this particular formula that the companies can't, right? So they don't have the wherewithal to correct the false information because they've been supporting it for 450 years, right? They can't utilize facts that improve the credibility, because what fact would improve the credibility of somebody hating you because of your skin color? Avoid appearing defensive. Well, they're taking everything personally, right? I didn't blame you that your grandfather owned my grandmother, but what I am telling you is that you're in a different position because your great-grandfather owned my great-grandmother. Right? And we have the same last name. Hello, Williams. Hello, Williams. Hello, Jones. Hello, Jones. You know what I mean? Because we were branded with that name. You don't know what your original name was. You know what I mean? So our history is already fragmented, right? And you push positives about the company and then you go on social media. So you can really only address 40% of a formula. How is it going to come off as positive? So that's just one thing that really occurred to me. And then marketing in and of itself should be aspirational, right? So we're all, I'm going to defer to Antoine on this. So I sent you guys a picture. Check your phones, right? So that was in a window display of Target. And so they displayed this what they would term, I'm sure, diverse, right? And so you have, I'll explain the picture. It's of 2 dolls, and it's the black doll is the student, the white doll is the teacher, right? But there's black in the picture, so it'll be termed as diverse, right? Picture 2. Now this is the same window display, right? We're at a stable, and so the white doll is next to the horse in the stable, and she has a blue ribbon, so clearly she's the prize-winning equestrian, right? And I would say she's some kind of, I don't think she's quite black, but some kind of indigenous person, is back in the corner, some kind of farmhand, it looks like. So at face value, I'm thinking that the person who put this marketing together would say that they are bridging gaps, and they are now providing that aspirational, inspirational marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it looks like the people of color in these ads are subservient in the messaging.
Correct.
Yes. It's like but in the minds of whoever put that together, and I'm sorry to interrupt. They probably felt like, oh, we're meeting them halfway. That's how I took it.
Well, because there's no diversity in the room, right?
Like,
or
someone. At least we have the indigenous person and and the white doll. So we're meeting them halfway, but still missing the whole point.
And the thing is this, again, going back to what we talked about earlier. Oh, you said that you may have been at the table, but you may have never been given the floor to speak, right? So in these these marketing rooms, there may be a person of color in there, but they may feel like they don't have the power or weren't ever given the floor to speak and give their opinion. We all know the show Blackish. Dre is an ad executive at a marketing company. And it's so funny. A lot of they touch on real life subjects, and a lot of the things they talk about, Dre will sit there and try to. It's still a comedy show, all right? Let's be clear about that. But they get very serious about topics. Dre has to sit there sometimes and explain to his counterparts why this is wrong, why we shouldn't put that in a campaign, why. And he has the voice because in the show he is a senior marketing exec, right? He's a senior VP, but how many people of that level are in the room?
Right.
For these large-scale companies.
It's brilliant for him to even have that, to pick that career for this position in that show. It's very brilliant. Very brilliant, because marketing effect, it's a broadcast medium. And, right now, we plan to be a larger voice, because we're doing big things. Make no mistake about it. But that echo is heard.
Right. Absolutely.
And you know what? Oh, you probably should, when you, that picture, those pictures, those of those marketing campaigns, those should go in our links as well, so people understand exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. Because sometimes, people think, well, maybe they're exaggerating something. Yeah. But when you see it, it looks like The Help. Mm-hmm. The Help is in the corner, right? Yeah. And it's
why couldn't in the classroom? Why couldn't they both be pupils?
Correct.
Right. Why couldn't that? Why couldn't they just be playing? Why does it have to be a subservient role? And it doesn't. Right. It didn't have to be the other way around, right? But why couldn't the subliminal message be equal footing in this world?
Because the first thing that would be said is, they want the person of color to be in the front with the big horse, and no, it didn't have to be that.
Right.
Like this is the thing. I don't want you not to have something so I can have it.
Absolutely.
I want us both to have it.
Right.
I want us both to have it. Right. So this is why, and again, this is people's mentality as a whole, right? They think that, they're taking something from me. No one is taking anything. What we're saying is we want the chance to. We want the real opportunity, because another narrative is, well, it's so much better now than it used to be.
Right. Listen, on a diversity front, I'm going to, let me know if I'm interrupting, because I'm going to switch a little bit.
No, you're good.
So B was with a company, he contracted with a company, and they, were big on diversity, and they published a list of common Black names.
Huh.
Right.
Okay. Say that one more time for the people in the back.
Right.
I don't think, because some people may not catch that the first time that you said.
Okay. So he was working with a company, improving their recruitment and diversity, and they published a list of common Black names. Now, my only regret in that situation is not having the screenshot. Okay. Mm-hmm. But real talk, because racism hasn't changed, is being filmed, right? So we need to gather evidence, which was one of my key points in how to market, right? You have to be able to correct that false or validate the history.
Right.
So B, I'm going to switch to you. What was your reaction when you saw that? And if you remember, what were some of the names on it? Because this is how people think, right? So you got to hit them between the eyes with the truth.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was, oh my God. We've known for years that people will change their names if they have to, because shorten it, whatever you need to do. Because when you're looking at resumes, you could have two identical candidates, and they can pick out the name. And if there's a common Black name, then that person maybe more than likely tends to not get that job, right? Over the common white name, if you will.
But my thing is, how do you know how they were using the list? Did they use it well intended? You need to correct them like, hey, listen, you shouldn't be looking at anybody that way or assuming credentials based on names. You should actually delete the names, put the resume in the system, evaluate the credentials, and I've worked for, finance companies where you are loaning money. And my manager at the time, white man or whatever, great guy. But the first thing he taught me was, you look at the credit, you don't look at the name. You look at the credit, you don't look at the address.
Right.
When you present a case to me, I don't want to know where they live. I don't want to know their name. I want to know your decision based on credit. And that's a beautiful thing to be taught that.
Yeah.
Right.
For him to be so insistent on it, because he knew human nature and he knows the history of this country and these natural prejudices.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
When you want change, you have to be intentional, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch on B's point too, like with the resumes. I can count. I can't count on how many hands, or whatever. But I have a lot of friends with, as people would say, urban or just Black names, and for their resumes, for those that have the safe name, like for their middle name, they would use their middle name for the resume.
Yeah. Right. I have a friend who, her first name is Tamika, but corporately, professionally, she's an excellent career. She goes by Tammy.
Right.
Wow.
And
B, I was going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
When they put that list out, what was the intention of the list?
Yeah. What was the point?
The intent of the list was, I think it was just to show these different names. Companies aren't going to come out and explicitly say, hey, here's some common Black names. If you see this name, if you see a Malik, then skip over that resume, right? But
there's code.
But there's code, exactly. So they're not going to come out and say it, but in displaying the list of names, it gives somebody else information that they may or may not have had to use how they need how they deem needed to use going forward. For me, though, in my position, in my background, I looked at it and I thought it was I thought it was offensive, right? Why do you have a list of common white names, common Asian names? Do you have these lists?
Brian, all names matter.
You see?
I'm sorry.
See how,
I'm sorry.
I had to crazy that sounds? It sounds crazy when you say that, right? But that's what it is. And trust and believe that company was not the first and they're not the last company that has that list. It's terrible. But when we talk about systemic racism, that is one thing that is happening that continues to persist and continues to happen, that enables companies to promote a white employee versus a Black employee. And when we talk about systemic racism, we talk about access to opportunity, we talk about the wealth gap, all of these things are tied in. And so what we're seeing, I think what we are seeing right now, and this is a little off of that subject, but still relevant. What we're seeing right now is with the angst amongst folks who are upset at changing the names of schools or tearing down monuments of Confederate soldiers. We see that there's so many parts of the system that are being challenged right now that those sort of in that perceived white supremacist power are losing their minds, because you're coming at them from so many different angles and so many different things that they're feeling, and it tends to be a white reaction of victimness.
Right.
Well, you're attacking our this or that. I'm like, no, we're just kind of coming for to make change.
It's an undercurrent of guilt, right? That turns into anger because it's defensiveness. And sometimes it's okay to be like, man, I just didn't think about it that way. And of course, it's fun. That's okay. If you're open to the conversation and you're open to the possibility of changing your thought processes or being intentional about information when it's being presented to you, being that when you watch something on TV, you can kind of say, oh, I see why Antoine may say, I speak code. Right? And because I say that sometimes to people and they're like, well, what does that mean, Antoine? I said, it means exactly what I said. I understand when someone says something that when they say this, in my mind, it means this. Well, why do you believe that? I said, well, let's repeat it. Let's say it again. Why would you even say that to me? Right? Why? That doesn't make sense. Sometimes, you really have to, you look at what's being said and then you go to the why, right? That's what we do, just in general as people. And that's just one of the things that when you're trying to explain that to someone else and they can't understand the basics of that, sometimes you have to stop the conversation.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people need to, what it's going to come down to, I think one of the key words today is defensive. People need to get over that, but you also have to humble yourself. When you take down your defenses and you're a bit humbled, be open. And a lot of people are also that may want to stand up and fight for what's right, but they're not. They're scared of how they're going to be viewed, by their peers. So it's that fear, it's that defensiveness, and just people aren't humble. That whole pride can go either bad or good, depending on how it's used. So you got to use that wisely.
I always come back to being able to be vulnerable when having discussions about race and diversity. If a couple things, vulnerable, ego, right? I always say ego is easing God out. Look, be able to allow your ego, put your ego to the side so that you can listen openly to somebody else's perspective. And to Rio's point, you don't have to be defensive if they're saying that you might have a privilege because you're white, right? White privilege is always battled with, well, I don't have any privilege. I worked at,
my parents worked for
my parents
they had
worked
nothing.
Hard
My grandfather had nothing. Okay.
Or and even crazier, right? The folks that are white that maybe are not affluent, that are maybe poor white, right? Well, you still have a privilege, right? You can still walk down the street without fear of being pulled over or assaulted by a cop, or having somebody follow you through a store, regardless of how much money you have or don't have, right? So if you're not able to get yourself into a vulnerable state where you can allow yourself that ability to say, look, maybe I wasn't aware, or maybe I was, and now it's now my time to really listen to this and give it some credence and understand what my Black friend or what anybody on TV or in the news or wherever I'm seeing that information, whatever they're saying, let me take that time to actually hear it instead of being so defensive like I've been up to this point in my life.
Right. Real quick, I think we've talked about this on past episode, or we talked about it amongst ourselves, but I always talk about a story where I went to go buy a car and I was probably 23-ish, 24 years old. So this is almost 20 years ago. And I used to work with kids in after school and summer camp programs. So I was leaving work, and the dealerships all by the airport in Orlando, there's a bunch of dealerships back. So, and my job was near there. So I actually went to a dealership, and when I pulled in, I'm shorts and a polo. But I've been outside with kids and stuff. So I just really stopped by to see a particular vehicle. When I went in, the truck didn't have a price on it. So I had to go find someone first off. I was there for 15 minutes. I had to go find a rep. And then when I asked what the price tag was, I was told, well, we have to run a credit check, right? And the week after that, when I went to another dealership, I actually wore a long sleeve button down and slacks because I wanted the perception to be different. Whereas I have friends that are white that will purposely go to a dealership and look like I look like I just came, off the side of the road, so they don't think I have money, so they don't try to price gouge me, or they give me a better deal.
Yeah,
I dressed up because I just wanted to be taken seriously, whereas they dress down because they're like, hey, I want them to think that I don't have anything or as much as I have.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I told somebody that conversation, and he was like, well, Antoine, I just don't understand that. Like, I don't see a problem with that at all. As far as, because they didn't understand, when they saw you walk in, they thought you were just some kid off the street. You already look young, so I can only imagine what you looked like at 24. And I was like, you missed the entire point of that story.
Right. Not to mention, you shouldn't have to change what you wear intentionally. You know what I mean? So they taught you a lesson instead of you teaching them a lesson, right?
Right.
I mean, the biggest lesson in this is not giving that particular store your money, which is honestly,
it worked out that way. Absolutely.
It's the underlying message in what we're talking about, because we're talking about corporate responses. And if corporations are clamoring for the right response to be seen in the right part of history, it just means the power of the Black dollar is more than we think it is.
Right.
Or else why do it, right? They're definitely not doing it because, hey, we just, I'm working on my halo.
Right. And and to go back to the original topic of the show, right? Disingenuous. So I believe, like, for instance, Drew Brees, right? He was doing that interview when he made some statements about kneeling of the flag, and but
that was an apology. Carry on.
Right. That was in a video interview. Right. It was a video interview because of COVID, but when he made his apology, it was a written statement. Initially, I didn't accept that. If you said it in a video format, I want your apology in a video format. If you say something in the light, don't apologize to me in the dark. Right. Like, give it that same energy. Right. And I said that from the moment a written statement. Okay, this is his PR team getting it together, but if it's genuine, like, that should be a quick conversation. All right, look, let's go, because I was misinformed, or I didn't think of it in that manner. Yeah,
he never cared to, and it's going to be incumbent upon us to hold him accountable for those words and those actions, because he was seen taking pictures, supporting the Trump administration.
Right.
He just tweeted within the last 24 hours, white power chants. So who do you stand on? Like, I don't fault you for your politics necessarily, but when you support efforts,
what's wrong?
Clear efforts, clear words that hurt people that look like me and jeopardize the future of my children, do I forgive you because you throw a straight ball? I have issue with that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because you can memorize.
I have a question for the group.
Yes, sir.
So my question is, and I guess somewhat playing devil's advocate, so we're speaking about those that are disingenuous in corporations and just also individuals. Do we, to a degree, accept that, or do we just say, okay, well, at least they're saying the right things and use that momentum to keep going? Do we not make sure we're not distracted by whether their intentions are good or not?
No, man. I think, look, I'll support, as far as corporations, I'll support the companies who are doing the right things. Ben & Jerry's, this is not the first time for them. Their message has been consistent throughout. They put, someone took a picture, "We must dismantle white supremacy," was what Ben & Jerry's had on their window in their storefront, right? They've been consistent throughout. I will go and support Ben & Jerry's. However, finding a company or hearing about a company who supports financially and puts thousands or millions of dollars behind a president who wants nothing but to continue to spread racism and divisiveness, you know what? there's not something that I can do. I can't write a letter to the CEO or whatever. But what I can do is choose to spend my money elsewhere. And that is my way, right? Because, and to your point, your question about do we trust their intentions? No, their intentions are when they get called out to the Drew Brees. Drew Brees said what he meant, right? And then once he got called out, then he backpedaled, then he apologized, then he apologized again, then he apologized again because he has the ability to have a PR team that says this looks terrible, or he's getting drug on all social media and ESPN for his commentary. So no, I don't necessarily. I'll trust your actions more than I'll trust your words.
Drew Brees is his belief system and structure. He's going to continue. That gets instilled in his children, right? And you may say that in public, but like B, you said, he said what he said and he meant it. And again, he didn't go on that platform to say these things. It was a question that was asked to him. So it was hey, it was a real reaction. He didn't have time to plan a response.
Exactly.
Right. And that's what these platforms do. I mean, let's be clear. That's why there's so much media training for these professional athletes, because one false step and it's problematic.
Here's the thing. To answer your question, call them out. Call them out. Absolutely. Because how would it ever become better? So it's not of, oh, I don't want to accept, or you're creating barriers for progress. You're introducing bridges for progress, because I want your next marketing campaign, I want your next press release to be inclusive, to be understanding, to support the community, to not avoid the truth. So you have to call them out. You have to stand in your truth at one point, which is really where we opened the show. The other thing is that we talked about, is the economic ramifications. So we have to understand our dollars. That's my toddler. We have to understand our dollars, where they're allocated and what that means. And there's so many, communities that keep their dollar circulating in their community well over 30 days.
Right.
Okay. Whereas we're less than a day. We're less than half a day.
Yeah.
In our community. Yeah. So how would you have the economic impact and strength to get better unless you are very deliberate in where your dollars are being spent? And that's not to exclude, because we're not for exclusivity. We're not for that. Right. But we are for understanding the same economic principles that are fair and that garner success. So, absolutely. And that's the same thing. You got to call them out. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So do we think, I've got a couple more points here before we button this up, but, with all these responses that people have had to have a new posturing, this is really an extension of your question, Rio. So you have a new posturing when it comes to COVID-19. You have a new posturing when it comes to Black Lives Matter. Is corporate America in crisis?
Yes.
I love the pause after the question. Yes.
Yes. Because to me, I feel like it's, I don't want to speak for everybody, but yes, I think everybody's in panic mode. I mean, you have essentially two, you have the pandemic going on there. You have obviously Black Lives Matter movement. You have a lot going on at once, and they weren't prepared for that. You just weren't. They're not prepared for either. So yes, everybody's in panic mode. That's why some of these, we're talking about being disingenuous, going back to that, some of them are rushing their responses also to the Black Lives Matter movement. That's another thing. I understand to a degree, we're like, okay, where's your response at? But, sometimes things take time when you're being genuine. They take time to put together. So yeah, the world's in a crisis. Let's be honest about it.
Timing is everything. You can't be too soon and you can't be too late.
Right.
Right. You guys have anything else before I get into our final question?
Y'all have some great fire questions today. I was like, where we at? Love this episode. This is great.
So I don't know, right? If do I think that there's been a disruption to corporate America? Yes. Do I believe that corporate America is in crisis? Yes and no. I think that disruption is enough to cause a stir. But I also believe that, unfortunately, we've seen there are enough bailouts that come from the government for some of these larger corporations that they're going to be able to sustain and withstand and get through this. They might come through it. Okay, they might come through it a little bumpy, a little bit scratched up, but they will keep it moving. And so, yeah, so that's why I say, are they in crisis? They're in crisis for their PR, for their face, for what it looks like. Maybe right now for their stocks, for their stock price. But I do think that they will come back because that's the history of this country. It's cyclical. We know that they're gonna take the hit and they're gonna come back. But what I feel worse for are, and there are some companies some big corporations who are taking this and are trying to move forward, and they are, having the conversations inside the company. They're donating to organizations that can help, and they're I think saying and doing the right things. But again, I also think that there's disingenuous companies who are just trying to check the box and just trying to make it through, and we will see that start to play out.
So I wanted to say I didn't want to answer even after Rio's answer, because what I was thinking was going to be a little bit different. I do not believe that they're in crisis. What I believe is they're waiting for the next news cycle. They're waiting for the next story. I believe they're trying to, they're paddling their feet underwater crazy just to stay above water, right? And I get it. And look, let's be clear. I do believe, like you said, the bridge is being built to progress, but the next step of that is standing on the bridge with us towards progress, right? So is that going to be the case? You look at Robert Iger, Disney CEO, like this guy has been very outspoken about the president of the United States. Not only, see, this is the thing, companies like Disney, bottom line is their biggest concern, right? We always say this on this show, it's people over profit. When Bob Iger makes these statements, like he's putting people first. Now, I'm not saying that he's done everything perfectly. He's been the CEO of Disney for a very long time. And we all know that Disney has their challenges in a lot of other areas. But for him to stand up before it was popular to do so, I look at a lot of those as genuine thoughts, genuine, and also putting people in powerful positions, putting diverse people in those powerful positions. That's another thing that I would say that he pushed at that corporation as well. So I just don't think corporations are in crisis. I think they're just trying to wade water until they figure out a way to get to the next news cycle. So that's why these topics have to stay intentional. We have to keep talking about them. We have to keep pushing. I saw somebody the other day that before Breonna Taylor's, the officers, before they were fired, this guy put up on his post and he said, hey, let's not forget, everybody's news cycle is changing, but Breonna Taylor's killers are still free. They're still employed. And, so he was just like, hey, look, George Floyd, I get it. But hey, look, boom, let's not forget this too.
Right. So, and I think, right, the irony of the situation that we're in where we have these two things going on is this pandemic has caused a pause to the news cycle, right? It's caused us to pause, and we're not watching sports right now. I know the NBA is coming back, but we're not watching sports. So we can continue to have this conversation, and it's slowing down the news cycle. Yes, you have every other day there's something new, or every day there's something new with the person that sits in the White House right now, and his craziness. But by and large, we're not talking about sports. So it's keeping it right here. So those companies, Antoine, you're talking about are swimming fast and pedaling underwater. They're having to do it a lot longer than they would if we were not in the situation where we had this pandemic right now.
And we're getting ready to come. It's election time too, right? So it's going to stay on the radar a lot longer because we're getting ready to go into those months. And don't think that Joe Biden is not going to hit that hot topic every opportunity he gets.
Mm-hmm. My takeaway is, do they have the stamina to tread water that long? Because we don't know how long this is going to last. We could have been through at least one issue, but the way the pandemic was handled, that's just going to trail on for quite some time.
Right.
Stamina in anything, right?
That's a great point. Yeah, I feel so. Yeah, I think that's a great point. So though you can be in crisis, I still feel like they're in crisis, but like you guys were saying, I also go along with that, because just because you're in crisis doesn't mean you're not going to bounce back. So like you said, it also goes back to treading that water, how long some of them are going to come above it. It's a bit tough. But at the end of the day, it's all about survival. But yeah, the bigger corporations, yeah, no doubt. I think they'll come through. That's just historically speaking,
Right. So we talked about probably more than I thought, when I go through the production and things like that, I kind of have a feel of the tenor. I have a feel of the cadence of the show. And we really hit on a lot of points that deserve further exploration. We talked about heroes and adversaries of the movement, who's with us, who's not. You can't arrest your way out of social problems. And that's the bottom line. So what are we really going to do? How are we really going to reform? Marketing, we talked about, a big don't when it comes to marketing. Can you be inspired when the message is that you're less than?
Yeah.
But people support that store like, hey, it's like, let me give my tithes, make sure my mom is good, let me shop it. Okay. So, we really have to think about that. Companies are changing their posturing and they're signaling that, the Black dollar is necessary. The Black dollar is needed. And we should have that same value. Just like we have the value for ourselves and our people and our families. And does protest politics work? Okay. So there's a lot going on. There's some things that, again, deserve our attention and more. Our final question for today. Are we ready? Drum roll, please. All right. All right. I'm going to button this up quickly, right? So, fellas, what are your fears for the future?
Oof, that's deep.
My fear. Yeah. So I'm gonna jump quick on that. What are my fears for the future? My fears are that we get through all of this and nothing changes, and we're still having the same fight, and all of this would be for nothing. My fear is that we don't stop the backsliding that we've been experiencing, and we end up in a worse place than we were in the 60s in the civil rights era. My fears are that we don't get this police reform right, and we continue to have the same challenges. And as a Black man, I continue to have to look over my shoulder or wonder if I'm going to get pulled over or harassed by a police officer. Let me start there.
Your fear summed up is they put us back in our place, or we're not able to create a new place and get rooted. Go ahead.
So, obviously, I don't have children yet, and being you do. But what I do have is 3 nephews and 2 nieces. And my fear is that we see these posts now where young people are saying, my great-grandmother is in tears and in disbelief that today in 2020, we're having the same exact conversations that she had to have 80 years ago. Like, this is like that her parents were still talking about the same things then. So that is my fear, is that, right, Brian, nothing changes, right, B? Like that, we go through all this and nothing changes. I think things have already changed somewhat, but again, they won't change to the level we need them to. But I don't want to be talking to my 6 and 7-year-old nephews in 10 years about the same things that we're talking about today, because then it was all for naught.
Right.
My fear is, I try to find a positive in everything. So there's some positive in my fear. So my fear is that at some point there will be a change, but a likely reality is that I won't be alive to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And before we get off that, on a lighter note, I'm gonna say this: Ben and Jerry's, I appreciate what you have done, but I'm buying my ice cream at 1,000 degrees of Winter Garden.
We appreciate that.
All right.
We actually, on some economics, we just brought on Smile Ice Cream, which is a Black-owned company, and we're in talks right now with a juice company that's Black-owned. So,
is there a vegan ice cream option?
Yes, there's some non-dairy options. Sorbet.
No, I'm serious.
There's a lemon sorbet. There's a mango strawberry, I believe.
Yes,
and a mango. I mean, very, very good. In the lemon sorbet, there's even like lemon zest on top. It's so good.
And you're tasting it. He makes
real.
it. It's my goodness. We did the tasting, and I kept coming back to. He's got about 16 flavors. I kept coming back to that lemon zest, and it is fantastic. I encourage you all to try it.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, your face right there was like Miss Tabitha Brown when she says, my God.
It really is so good.
It was that good. I love it.
Change your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I think I echo what you guys say. You know, my fear is that the change won't be realized. My fear is that we keep the standing that they want us to have, that they continue to be comfortable, that, we can, they're comfortable saying things like you're so articulate, and they don't understand that that's because we weren't allowed to read. So the fact that we can, and we've mastered the English language, is like some kind of phenomenon, So the fears run deep. My fears are for my children that, when I explain this to them, it won't be a history. It won't be a history lesson.
Right.
When I explain this to them, it'll be what happened at school today.
Right.
And
current climate.
Correct. Yeah. And that to me is even more, or more scary than anything else. All right. So.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just, you talked about how we weren't allowed to read. It was against the law for us to be able to read. So when I talk about the opposition, let's not downplay the fact that, the thought of changing the laws, making the rules, doing whatever, to O's point, to keep us in our place, if you will, or in the place that they would like to see us. The outright blatant voter suppression that we're seeing across the country. These things, that's what I'm talking about. Like we do have a movement, and there are some positives, and we are moving forward, but let's not fall asleep at the wheel and forget that the opposition to this movement is just as strong as the momentum of this movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Wise words. Well, fellas, thank you. You can find out more about this show, our platform, and us individually on manyhandspodcast.com, manyhandspodcast.com. If you're interested in being a guest, please use our contact us through that website, or email booking@mckinneybrands.com, and we'll be happy to have that discussion with you. We want more people involved. Send your feedback, your questions. We love them. You guys give great feedback. So let's keep that going. And grand opening.
Grand close.